studying film, going through a light practice on Wednesday, and in the back of their minds, they know that the Warriors' savior, Kevin Durant, is not walking through that door in uniform. So I think them knowing that is probably, I don't want to say comforting, but it definitely helps in their game planning. They got to stop two guys, 30 and 11. That's it. So I think that that's something they have going for them. And it just goes back to the depth. I mean, Golden State's lost a lot of it. And I do agree with your point about Steve Kerr shortening the rotation if the Warriors are going to have a chance. But at the same time, I mean, the Raptors are the deeper team, especially with all these injuries that Golden State are suffering right now. So the depth is there in Toronto.
And I want to kind of finish with one thing on the Warriors that I really want to get your thoughts on. What do you make of Draymond Green in this series so far?
Not good offensively. I said he's been passing the ball well, but to me, he just looks tentative out there.
Yes.
And, I mean, if we're going to speculate on this, Ben, I think that it's a mental thing because I read an article about Draymond Green having a crash diet. He had an intervention with his mother and his fiance about, his attitude and the way he approaches the game and, his anger and trying to control it. But I think what's bothering Draymond, and I haven't heard this yet. You've heard this here first on Baseline Jumper. I think Draymond knows that at the end of this series, the Warriors, as we know it, are over. Whether or not Durant leaves, and we'll get into that in a little bit, the long-term impact of the injury. But I think he knows that this is it. Iguodala may not come back. Livingston may not come back. Clay may not come back. He might be looking at a team which is him and Steph next year. So I think that might be messing with his psyche a little bit. He really needs to focus if he wants to.
So what I think part of it is, though, Jason, is that I think he's become so accustomed to playing with Durant. And when he was playing with Durant, there was really a set role that he had. His role was really to make the pass or to drive against the defense. And because so often he was playing with Durant, Curry, and Thompson, he was getting these wide open lanes. And the whole season, he had been told, you can just tell. I try not to read too much, but you can just tell he has it in his head that he is not supposed to shoot any threes outside of the corners. And it has completely thrown his game off because the Raptors know this. And it's a little bit reminiscent to me of when the Spurs played the Rockets a few years ago. And they knew what the Rockets wanted to do. And they just said, we're just not going to give you those threes. We'll give you these threes. We'll give you these wide open mid-range. But we're just not going to give you those shots you want. We're going to take those away. And Green has just been absolutely befuddled by the fact that they're giving him these wide open looks and he doesn't really know what to do. And you see these possessions where he kind of looks one way with the ball, looks the other way, and just doesn't know what to do because he's got 10 feet of space in front of him. And it's really hurting their offense that he's not being more decisive with the ball because the Raptors have picked up on that, Jason, and they're giving him shots top of the key. They're giving him shots anywhere but the corners. And as a result, the Warriors offense just stalls. And they're kind of hip to the fact that he doesn't want to shoot those layups. They know he wants to throw the lob to whoever it is who's in the dunker spot. And they're trying to cut that off. And it's meant that Green hasn't really been a factor offensively for most of the series. And I'm not sure what to do here. I mean, it's been a little disappointing, and I think if you're a Warriors fan, it's going to be an interesting question after this season whether you really want to keep him because his three-point shooting has actually deteriorated, Jason, and it feels like it's gotten to a point where you can't trust him to take those shots, and then I just don't know what you can do with him offensively, especially as he starts to lose a step.
That's a very, very interesting point. I mean, is there anything else you want to say about the actual games before we get into KD to close out the show? Because I have one thing, and I'm a man who admits when I'm wrong, and I was dead wrong about Marc Gasol. I said in our finals preview 2 weeks ago that he was going to have a low usage rate because, bigs are just not dominating the game anymore. I was expecting to see much more Ibaka. And with the way Cousins has played and with the Warriors putting Bogut out there, I mean, Gasol's been great. He's just like Brook Lopez, where he remodeled his game to shoot the three, hits that shot from the top of the key with relative ease. And Gasol's kind of been that third option after Kawhi and Pascal Siakam, and I couldn't have been more wrong about it. And we'll see if the Raptors have what it takes to pull it off in Game 6.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna kind of do it for our coverage of the actual series. But there is something, Jason, that I think we'd be remiss if we don't talk about a little bit, and I think we'll have a segue also from there. But that is that really this Kevin Durant injury does not just affect the series, Jason. We talked a lot about that injury. It also is going to affect this offseason. And we're going to have a lot more on that as this goes, but I feel like we have to touch on this sort of seismic effect that this has and how it's going to ripple across a lot of these other free agents. Because the first thing after we talked about that timeout with Nick Nurse, the two of us were talking about what does this do if he tears his Achilles, which is a year-long injury, as you very astutely noted earlier in the show. It's a year-long injury. So this means that he is likely going to be out, best case, until the beginning of the playoffs next year. He is going to almost certainly miss the entirety of the regular season next year if he has a torn Achilles. And that really complicates the free agent outlook that he's going to be seeing, because teams are going to essentially have to decide if they're going to be willing to pay him to sit for a year. And I think they might. I'll be honest, I think they might. Or a possibility you alluded to, Jason, does he think about staying with the Warriors for one more year?
Oh, man. I mean, where do we begin with this, Ben? I think Brian Windhorst of ESPN said it best right after the game. I was watching SportsCenter, and he said, look, tonight the NBA has changed. And it has, because it went from the summer of Durant to a summer full of even more question marks than there were 36 hours ago. Before we get to Durant, though, I do want to give one final credit to Warriors general manager Bob Myers, because he's the face of the franchise from a front office standpoint. And regardless of if Kevin Durant was angry or upset with the Warriors medical staff for clearing him to play, or if there was pressure from his teammates or the coaching staff, Bob Myers came out after the game and cried in front of the media about how good of a person Kevin Durant is, and how if anyone should take the blame for this, it's me. Most teams' general managers would have put out a press release. Bob Myers went out and he directly faced the music. And Ben, we have to give him his props. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I thought it was great. I mean, I think you could really see it's always easy for us to dissect these locker rooms, but I think you could really tell that the Warriors are a pretty tight-knit bunch. Even if there's been drama in and out, and there's been points where, they're probably frustrated with everything that's going on, they really cared, and you saw Curry and Thompson carrying Durant out of the arena too. Curry was on the verge of tears a couple times too. You could tell in the
post game interview, yeah.
So I mean, it was really. I don't know. I mean, it sounds weird to say that this is like kind of a touching thing when it's such a sad moment, but it is touching to sort of just see this is what sports are really all about, that camaraderie and that sense of kind of friendship and being teammates and just that sense of having each other's back. And you can feel that the Warriors really have that. And I agree. I think it seems to extend even through the front office with Myers.
So now this could go a few different ways. Woj, our good buddy, friend of the podcast, and second to Anthony Puccio in breaking NBA news so far during this postseason. But he said a lot of these teams have not changed their stance. Teams like the Knicks, the Clippers, the Nets will still offer Kevin Durant max money. Now, Kevin Durant could opt into his contract and rehab with the Warriors. However, I don't think Bob Myers would just take a one-year deal. I think he's going to say to KD, listen, we love you. If you want to stay, you got to re-up long-term. You can't just sign a one-year deal and use our training staff to rehab your Achilles injury and then leave us next summer. So it's going to be very interesting. I think even with the injury, he's going to command a max salary, whether it's with the Warriors or elsewhere. I mean, if you're a team like the Nets or the Knicks, right, do you still sign Kevin Durant to a 4-year, $160 million deal and get 3 years of Kevin Durant after it? Now, you look at players who have torn their Achilles in the past few years, a lot of them were much older. Wes Matthews, Kobe Bryant.
Dominique.
These guys were not the same after. Dominique is another one. I think guys like Dominique and Pat Ewing were, a little overweight on the back end of their careers when they tore their Achilles. But Kevin Durant is probably the youngest player still in his prime that this happened to. So he may not be as athletic when he comes back, but he's still going to be a lethal scorer a lethal shooter. So if you're one of these teams that don't have his bird rights, will you pay 4 years, $160 million for essentially 3 years of service time?
I mean, I think if you're the Knicks, I mean, to me, there's like a weirdly perfect scenario for the Knicks. If you can get him to sign a 4-year deal and you're the Knicks, you can really just tank again, get another draft pick, and then just come back to the table a season from now, get another free agent, and now all of a sudden you've got Kevin Knox, you've got your first round pick from this year who RJ Barrett has come out and said that he wants to be a Knick. So you're likely going to have a guy like RJ Barrett. Now suddenly you add in Kevin Durant and another free agent and another draft pick, Jason. And then if you want to, you have a chance to sign Anthony Davis outright. So, I mean, to me, the team that it makes sense for would be the Knicks. I mean, if you're a team like the Nets, I don't know how you can do it in good conscience because you're basically going to get stuck. I mean, it's the same to me if the Knicks decide they go for two free agents. I mean, you'd have to be out of your mind. If you get a guy like Kemba Walker and Durant doesn't play, you're probably not a playoff team, but you're not going to have one of the worst picks either. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to me for a team that's hoping to compete next year, unless you're the Warriors, where, I mean, I said to you last night, I don't know which would be more on brand for a franchise, whether it would be the Knicks paying $40 million for a player who doesn't play a minute in the regular season, or for the Warriors to get one of the best players in the league back just in time to potentially win another championship. And I do think that those are becoming the two most likely outcomes given this injury.
I mean, this could go so many ways just because I was driving home from work and I've been listening to sports talk all day to try and get ready for the podcast to just hear updates. And, Doris Burke and Ramona Shelburne have done a terrific job reporting from the sidelines and on the radio broadcast. And they were reporting that the general feel in that locker room, it was raw emotion, but a lot of it was anger. Kevin Durant was just lashing out at anyone and everyone in his sight because, when he's that hurt, he's blaming the training staff. He's blaming the pressure he's under. And you can't fault him. You can't really fault anybody in these situations. I mean, it's an Achilles injury. It just popped. No one knew that was coming. So it's just so tough. But that just leads me to question, will that anger towards the Warriors front office say, you know what, I don't want to rehab here next year. I'm going to go to Brooklyn with their first-class facility in Interstate City, and I'll get back in 8 months instead of a year. Because the Nets training staff is good enough that, they could expedite his recovery? Or does he want to go to the Knicks and just, let the young guys play for another year? Or does he want to go to the Clippers and, join that up-and-coming team next year? I mean, there's so many options for Durant, but I think he's got to take the rest of this month, whether the Warriors win or lose, and just calm down, work on your recovery, and then see how you feel on June 30th.
I mean, there's 30 teams that'll take Kevin Durant with or without this injury and sign him to like a 4-year max. I mean,
29, he ain't going back to Oklahoma City.
Whew, that would be something, huh? But I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think the most fascinating piece here is still to come, which is if we confirm that he's torn his Achilles, ultimately then, what does that mean? Does he come back next year for the playoffs? Could he come back that early? I mean, Cousins, it took him, I think, about a full year to recover. So it's really going to be very interesting to see because, I mean, you would think he might be able to come back late in the playoffs for a team, but it's likely that if he's torn his Achilles, Jason, he's going to miss the entirety of next year, which, if nothing else, would be just a tragic thing for NBA fans to be denied the privilege to get to watch one of the best in our game. So, regardless of anything else, Jason, regardless of who gets him, how things turn out in free agency, more than anything, I think we both just want to wish Kevin Durant the best of luck and a speedy recovery because no one wants to see that type of injury happen, especially for a guy who's toughing it out and trying to come through for his teammates. So good on you, Kevin Durant, and we hope you're going to come back as good or better than ever.
I can't even speak. That was so beautiful.
Well, you know what else is pretty beautiful, Jason? I got something else that you're going to just love. So
here we go.
I'm throwing you a bone here. We've talked a lot of Warriors and a lot of Raptors, but we have to talk a little Nets, Jason. There was a big trade. I don't want to say anymore. You take it away because I know you're excited about this.
So we haven't talked Nets in probably 3 weeks because 2 weeks was our finals preview, and we had no Nets news, and we would have probably